Hey folks, good morning. Thanks for attending our presentation. Kind of started a few of these talks that I have spoken to a lot of people that said they had looked at Intellicheck and they looked at it in the past and they said, hey, nothing to see here. But I'm like, that means you looked at the old Intellicheck, right? We are a completely different company than we were when I started. You know, if you look at it back then, less than 2 million in recurring revenue. Last year we ended it with just shy of 20 million in recurring revenue. You know, and to say how sticky we are and what we do with our customers. In Q1, we renewed $10 million worth of our revenue base. You know, so everybody who was any type of client renewed and either had a price increase or upsell. So we are extremely sticky. On the technology front, we renewed our tech stack. You know, so that we can take advantage of AI and data science analysis, because we see just about 100 million people or so a year go through our system. We're well underway with our migration to AWS, which is going to save us money on the cloud expenditure that we have, which is kind of basically our second largest expenditure. And we've completely diversified our client base. We used to be very, very tied to retail, and now we're much more in retail banking, title, automotive, and area I'm very excited about, which is background checks. And hopefully you all saw the press release that we put out yesterday morning, which was pretty exciting news. A bank that we've been doing just digital with signed a 3-year agreement with us to do everything in branch. You know, the first year of that contract, we look at it to be in the low 7 figures. The TCV of the total contract should be in the very high 7 figures. So that's a big change, and I think underscores what we do. So anyway, if I get this right, other button, there we go. You know, that we got a safe forward-looking statement, all that kind of stuff, you know. And if you want to see this presentation, it is on our website on the investor page. So a couple of things, you know, we have very unique technology. I'll talk about that a little bit. So that we can analyze DMV-issued documents, you know, basically what everybody uses to prove their identity in North America, with amazing precision, right? The magnitude of the problem is huge, right? There are, you know, 27 billion in fraud, right? About 15 million Americans get hit with it every year. 1.5 billion people around the world have had their data breached. It is so cheap to buy your information online, $5 to $20, depending on your credit rating. And then, if you think about it, all anybody asks you to prove your ID is, you know, prove who you are, is a driver's license and social security number. And I have a bunch of real and fake South Carolina licenses from where I live, and I love to play a game. I put them on a table and I say, pick out what's real and pick out what's fake. And people generally can't get even to 50% on them. They are that accurate, right? Law enforcement can't tell by looking at it. It's why so much law enforcement uses us. Account takeover is the fastest growing form of fraud. They hit banks with that all the time. It's one of the reasons that you know, banks are looking more and more to us to help them with the problem. You know, and I think it's amazing, 79% of auto dealerships have lost a car to identity theft. So it's everywhere. Okay, so here's what's different about us and everybody else. Everybody says, who do you compete with? And I'm going to say, well, sort of we're in our own world. What all other vendors do to authenticate a license is they take a photo of it, and then they're going to compare that to a template and say, hey, it matches, everything's in the right spot, you know, the font's the right size, all that kind of stuff. Now, that can be pretty accurate if you're spending a fortune on the technology like they do at the TSA. That doesn't work in a retail setting. It's far too expensive. It doesn't work in a bank. It's far too expensive. Now, the one thing about the barcode, and barcodes on all these fakes will scan, is because AMVA, which is this organization that all DMVs belong to, prints a standard barcode. So as long as you print to that, you create one, it's going to look real. Problem is, no state, no province, no new U.S. territory uses that standard, and they all use their own, and they all have unique hidden security features. And we basically taught the DMVs how to do barcodes in the 90s. And we still work with the DMVs today when they're changing their barcodes. We are what's called the DL ID card verification program. You can go on the AMBA website and it'll describe the program. But that means we know stuff in that barcode that nobody else does. And that's why we are so accurate. And you cannot hack that. The thing about, you know, templating and looking in the front, machine learning can figure that out right quick, right? Most of the fakes come from China, and they're pretty good at machine learning. So they are hyper realistic. Okay. So like I said earlier, we authenticate close to 100 million people every year. A couple of other things that are important about us is we work with the existing technology that's generally in place. In store or in branch, the same scanning gun that rings up merchandise cannot, you know, scan the barcode, give us what we need to authenticate it. In bank branches, the thing that can read a check can read the barcode, and we can, from there, we can authenticate it. So in person, no hardware really is required. So it's a very inexpensive solution to put in. And then if you're doing it remotely, we turn your phone into a scanner, which scans the barcode. Now, we can go all the way to scan the barcode, take a photo of the front, OCR that, make sure it matches, and do facial recognition. Most of our customers don't put their customers through that because the first step is so accurate. Why add friction? Because the more points that you put in friction, the more likely people are to drop out of whatever you want them to do. And like I said, we've got multiple state level and local level law enforcement that use us to authenticate licenses. So again, easy to use, integrates with the existing hardware, frictionless and customer friendly, right? Because you don't even do it. We're all used to handing over our licenses to do things. So if you want to go open up a credit card account at any kind of major retailer, they're going to ask you for the license. They scan it with a scanning gun, they hand it back, you type in your social security number, sometimes they'll want to know your income. We authenticate it, send all the data to the bank that they need to populate the application, and generally, I've done this at some of our customers, I have the credit before they can put my merchandise in the bag. It is that quick. So just a couple of things, like I said, you know, the only time really we lose a customer, we've got a bunch of bars and restaurants that use us, it's when they go out of business. All of our large customers, like when they start to 3 years later, they're up 150 to 200% in their spend with us. So 100% renewal rate on any major customer, 90% gross margins, you know, and what we consider an attractive current valuation of, you know, 3x revenue, you know, might be 2.5 now, or whatever. We've gone up so much. We expect positive adjusted EBITDA in 2025, and we've done a lot of changes to our sales and marketing functions. I brought in a woman who I think is fantastic to run customer success and implementation. She's already made a big difference. Brought in a guy who was instrumental in a ton of growth at Ping Identity, and he's already made a bunch of changes. And our marketing is really working well. Our YouTube, which seems to be a big way that people find out about companies, I think that's up, viewers up there about 140%. Website traffic is up over 30%, and I think more importantly, people are staying on the website 10% longer. So we are gathering interest, and we are seeing more inbound because of that. Just a couple of use cases where we are: auto, real estate, financial services, you know, physical and digital accounts were used for, you know, instant credit, account lookup, no receipt returns, opening bank accounts, taking a car for a test drive, you know, title insurance. Is it really you who is selling the home? Big growth area for us. If you look at the customers we have in that space now, it's about 40% of all title insurance that happens. Retail, card not present. I walk in and say, I forgot my credit card, but I want my points. They'll say, fine, let's see your driver's license, scan it. We send the information off to the bank. It's a real license. It's Brian Lewis, and they say, he's got credit. Go ahead. Banking, in-branch, digital, call centers, multiple use cases there. And then in the corporate world, we're doing employee onboarding. You know, is it a real person, and are they, you know, really able to work here? And account validation and account resets. All right, we do all of this in less than a second. All right, our core technology, we run about 44 milliseconds to be able to process the license. The other thing that's really important is we basically have 100% decisioning. And what I mean by that, the folks that need to take a picture of the license, especially if it's remotely, I defy all of you to try and take a photo of your license in this room with these lights and not have glare on it. And if there's a glare spot on it, they can't decide is it real or not, right? And then you can pay extra money, and most of them use the same company out of the UK, to take that photo and send it to a call center in India or the Philippines, and somebody looks at it and says, looks good, right? So not that accurate, and it also takes a while. So again, it does not work in retail settings or where you need to have the decision fast, because that can take 5 to 10 minutes. Nobody wants to have that happen. As I said, we've got NIST level certified facial biometrics. That's almost becoming a commodity nowadays. But what we really do is we verify in less than a second that the ID is real. We confirm that the ID belongs to the person who's holding it if you want, because again, we can match the face to that ID. And then we've got a bunch of other risk factors that we can send along as well, mostly for the digital world where, you got to be sure. What's the geolocation where this is coming from? Is this phone number actually associated with the person whose name's on the license? Has this phone number been known to be associated with fraud? Other things like that, so people can then put that into their model and decide, do they want to carry on with this transaction? Just so you have an idea, we're this little known company, but we've got really big customers, right? So a top 10 bank with, $400 billion in assets and one of the top 5 credit card issuers, a top 5 bank with over 2 million accounts, 1 trillion in assets, also a major large credit card provider for both of those. We do both their banking and their credit cards. And then another top 15 bank with 200 billion in assets, and then that one that we just signed up, for the expanded use cases that we announced yesterday. A couple of significant call-outs. Again, I said we're growing a lot in title, so Qualia and Doma. We also have some of the, the top 2, and I think we've got 4 out of the top 9 providers of title insurance. Big lease-to-own companies rolling out across their network now, 1,700 locations. We've got a university. Ghost student theft is amazingly high. That's about $9 billion, hitting mostly like community colleges and things like that. As I said, one of the top recognized brands in banking, and then the leading title company, right? So we are all over the place with everything from giant automotive chains, giant banks, and individual lease-to-own type companies. 2 of the things that I think are really kind of important, say a lot about us, just these 2 quotes, right? This is from one of the major banks that we deal with, and the SVP of fraud there calls us a true game changer in stopping fraud, top 5 of all time. And then the New York State DMV, before they started using us, they tested us. They ran 1,000 fakes against us, and we caught every single one of them. We just did some work with one of our clients, and our rate of letting a license get through that was later on associated with fraud was 0.01%. So that's, for them, we're running at 99.99% accurate. So they are a phenomenal reference client for us. There's the team, a bunch of good-looking people, right? So anyway, couple of financial highlights. We had total revenue, 4.89 million, 4.86 was SaaS. Part of when I say, we're a new, different company, when I got here, hardware was an enormous part of our business. I hate doing hardware. It's a pain to do, pain to support, and margins are horrible. So I made sure that we don't do that anymore, and all our growth has been in the SaaS revenue. We've got 5.1 million in cash, 0 debt, super clean cap table. Net income, loss of 318, adjusted EBITDA, basically break even. Adam can explain a whole bunch of this stuff about loss and profit and this and that, because we capitalized some stuff that we now have to recognize, so it's sort of, the money's already been out the door. But, I like where we're going. Trajectory has been a very good one. And as we said, we expect to be, EBITDA positive for the year. So, and there's the table. So that's my quick run through. I don't like to be talking for forever. I figure, give you the highlights and see if there's any questions. Yeah.
When your clients upsell, what are they typically buying? And are you looking into title theft, avoiding that?
Yeah, so when they upsell, usually it is additional use cases. Like in the case of the bank that we just announced, they had been using us for new account openings and call center, so digital world. And they use that to create the use case for the much more expensive, which would be, a lot more transactions in branch. And they stop so much fraud. They're like, we need to go this way. Or we've got banks that start in the retail, in the branch world and then move into digital. Or they might add additional signals. We've got ways to tell if, say, the license has been tampered with. So if I cut, take a picture myself, cut it and tape it to the license, like we can detect that when we're taking a photo. Or if it's a photo of a real license, we can detect that. So they might want to add those types of signals. And yes, in title insurance, we're doing two things. We've got a company that does payments. Like they process the payment. They want to make sure that it's you before they actually send the money. Or they're authenticating the seller, because there's a lot of that goes on. I'm surprised that, to me, I'm too chicken, right? It takes forever to buy a car. I couldn't sit there long enough to go through faking my identity. I'd just be waiting for the cops to come tap me on the shoulder, but I guess bad guys are braver but not smart. That answer your question?
Yeah, because right now here in New York, there's a whole big thing going on, title theft.
Mm-hmm.
Major problem.
Yep.
So I was just wondering if that's anywhere in your realm, that's why I asked.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're looking to stop.
Yeah, so that you can say you are.
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yeah.
space, too.
Yep. Any other questions? Chris?
I know retail isn't the star right now, but in terms of your, just to get into the dynamics of retail a little bit, obviously there's the stores, but also, do you also have things like hotels and casinos and those kind of, I'm trying to get more of a handle of how should we think about retail absent the, stores and the bankruptcies and the restaurants, looking out maybe longer term, is that going to be able to grow again? And will that be different?
So our customers continue to add retailers, because, they want, to make sure, because the banks take on the risk of the credit card fraud. So they want to get us in the process. The retailers like us because it's so much faster. And I always say, look at Macy's and like Nordstrom. When they release their earnings, they make as much or more on the credit card program as they do selling merchandise. So the fact that we're able to get them applications and approvals very quickly, that's why the retailers like us. So, and we are mostly in, like I said, we're in some hotel stuff, not a lot. Gaming, you've got to have licenses. You've got to have a gaming license to work directly with the casino or directly with the online gaming. So we're looking at that world through partnerships who already have the licenses, because it can take forever to get that license. Retail revenue year over year was down 26%, right? And it has been coming down, a combination of bankruptcies, and I think people are feeling a little bit like their credit maybe is maxed out, so that's down, right? But retail banking up 50%, title insurance, and these are revenue numbers, title insurance up like 340% or 350%. So things like that are growing. Automotive also up significantly through a combination of resellers and large auto groups coming to us directly. Right.
In terms of the facial recognition, if there was like widespread adoption of that, is that something that could mean negative to you guys?
It's funny. So the Identity Theft Resource Center just came out with a paper talking about how consumers are not comfortable with facial recognition, because the only way that works, right? So, what we're doing right now is, we take a photo of the license and then you do the selfie, and we're saying, do these two things match? For facial recognition to become sort of the key to get into everything, it means there's a database that is stored, because now I got to compare it. Because really, facial recognition is just mathematics of your face, and it's called a vector. You can store the vector, right? But if the vector's hacked, I now have your face, right? So that's what it personally has me kind of scared. I don't like the fact, the TSA says they're getting rid of it every time they take my photo. That worries me, right? Because, there was a hack of fingerprints in the UK years ago, and that meant I could replicate your fingerprint for things because it's there, it's stored. Same thing with the vector of your face. Once I have that math, I can reconstruct it, right? And deep fakes with a vector would be very, very hard to detect.
So in a way, AI could create a scenario where
Yeah.
you pushback to do it.
Yeah, and look, AI, it's one of the reasons I think that a lot of the, for a while, people were looking at voice recognition. That became super simple to copy and do. People are faking out their own family, all the scams that were going on with that. I got arrested and I need you to wire me money, right? And it sounds so much like your kid. That's why, a lot of that, banks were going that way. If you call into the call center, and, now they're not even offering it. And the same thing is starting to happen, I think, and it's always a race, right? It's like, can my AI beat your AI, and that's what's going on. And that's why, we don't do our own facial. I looked at that years ago, should we build it or just partner? And I can tell you that I'm glad we decided to partner because the price just keeps dropping. So, it's good for us. Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, well, if you want to play the game, we're going to be at table 16. We're going to have a couple of breaks. We'll see how well you do. All right, but thanks for your time, and I appreciate you being here.